returned to the bank at opening time to collect our funds, and then we were ready to proceed once more. Alright, let's go. Oh, that was an expensive journey. Nothing better happened. Gosh dang it. The Water Lily was a sleek, iron-hulled ship to submarine prototype, captained by a severe American by the name of Wicker, and crewed by a mix of Americans, Chinese, and Japanese, who all spoke a kind of salty, curse-studded sailor's English. In addition to the usual complement, the Water Lily carried an entire corps of brass-goggled engineers and a brace of submariners on standby, should the captain call the orders to submerge. The rumor was that she was a Confederate vessel, sold off to a private concern in the later, more desperate stages of the Civil War, but I saw no trace of a dark past aboard. The crew seemed a happy family and welcomed us into their iron-hulled bosom. Greetings, Captain. San Francisco to Salt Lake. On the subject, what about Salt Lake to Albuquerque? What about Albuquerque to San Pedro? I don't think we'd want to go down to San Pedro. I doubt we'll be going all the way down to Lima. Our cabin, while hardly spacious, was adequate to our needs. One of the midshipmen came by to show us how to use the pressure seals in case of submersion, but in all other aspects I looked forward to a peaceful steamship ocean crossing. I was not— oh, to be so lucky! The salty air blew cool and sharp against my face as I opened the door onto the top deck. It was painfully early, and the only passengers awake were a group of Chinese laborers hunched miserably near the stern. One of their number was vomiting copiously into a bucket. I offered him my own secret remedy, which I had brewed up for such an occasion. He swallowed it down with certain dubious desperation, but immediately improved in both complexion and temperament. He thanked me most profusely. I asked him about the captain, but with no language in common, communication was impossible, so we settled into playing dice in a quiet silence until the sun rose. Begin by wool trousers. Let's talk about our money. We are very, very well provided for. Yes, we still have to cross the Atlantic. We've got 32 days to do so, and North America. I accompanied Monsieur Fogg to a game of whist with a family of American missionaries who were traveling back to San Francisco for a family wedding. My master began strongly, but Mademoiselle Loretta, the eldest girl, had a sharp eye and won several hands in a row. A new round was dealt. I noticed Mademoiselle Loretta slip a card into her sleeve. I blinked twice in pure astonishment and glanced up at her face, which was utterly calm, betraying nothing of the action of her nimble fingers. The minister's daughter was a cheat, and a skilled one at that. I filed away the knowledge for an opportune moment, catching her eye to convey that I had noticed her little sleight of hand. She blushed with all the manufactured prettiness of an accomplished actress, then raised one eyebrow in silent challenge. Our journey continued on. I spent a day in the company of the Water Lily's submariners. They were all hardy men and women who preferred the dim enclosed spaces of the hold to the top deck. Too much sky, one of them said, squinting suspiciously. Her crewmate nodded. All that fresh air. They shuddered collectively and suggested a bracing race to the boiler room. I offered an alternative, having no great desire to sprint through the ill-lit, echoing ship's corridors. Their commander, a short Japanese-American woman, gave me a look of scorn. What do you suggest? I demanded a test of acrobatic skill. Though the submariners were all fit as horses, they had never attempted to, for instance, form a pyramid or walk the length of a corridor on their hands. They competed with me gamely, but admitted themselves outclassed. Commander Davis even applauded. It's Izumi to my friends, she said, clapping me heavily on the shoulder as I took my sleeve. You're not so bad. That's what I love to hear, that I'm not so bad. I was climbing the rigging entirely innocently and not at all for the purposes of spying on the crew to appease my own rapacious curiosity, when I heard two of the crewmen arguing in a pidgin mix of English and Japanese. I closed my eyes and listened to their voices. Only a few words were audible over the howling wind. Shrine, heathen, worship. Oh, brother, before a sudden scream rent the air. One of the sailors was falling from the platform's edge. I was unable to look away as he fell. A body lay still and crumpled on the deck, but I heard his scream in my head for days after. I looked up and managed to catch the sight of a fallen soldier's companion, his face still pallid. Was that the guilt in his eyes, or merely shock? He slipped away before the captain arrived. And I followed him. He retired to the crew's quarters, and I began to hear the sound of desperate muttered prayers. Interesting. The Water Lily's crew held a funeral for the dead sailor. I was not specifically invited, but was curious about the incident. The funeral was an excellent opportunity to learn more about the crew. Captain Wicker led the Christian service with customary grimness. I was surprised by the absence of the sailor's companion, who had been arguing with him just before his fall. Yet he was not the only one missing from the funeral. Oddly, only half the crew had come to pay respects. I asked my neighbor about this breach of custom, and she narrowed her eyes. Joseph was a convert, she told me defiantly. The captain taught him to read the Bible himself. The rest of the crew are heathens. They stay away from godly ceremonies. Ah. Storm, too exhausted to write a proper entry. Suffice to say, we were still afloat. As we settled down for the night, I was struck with an unrelated thought. Monsieur Fogg, the dateline! I have altered our watch already, Monsieur Fogg replied calmly. Did you think I might forget? The master was, of course, correct. With an eye such as his, it was unthinkable that he might miss such a detail. We had reached the point directly opposite Greenwich, where the hours we had lost in traveling around the earth were added back, a whole extra day. Greetings, mademoiselle. What about Cheyenne to Omaha? Yes, one more chance, but now, are all Frenchmen like you? No. Tell me more about Cheyenne. Cheyenne to Atlanta. Cheyenne to Washington. The most efficient way to Washington from here is to New Orleans. So close to the deadline now. Yesterday's storm hit us with little warning. One moment I was preparing Monsieur's saving water to exactly the right temperature. The next we were being tossed from one end of the cabin to the other. We were only lucky that the bed was securely nailed to the floor. The ship shuddered and moaned as the seas flickered with lightning. The storm nearly lasted 6 hours and blew us far off course. The captain spent most of the day peering at his charts, trying to locate our position. Oh no! Are we gonna get lost? There was no land anywhere upon the horizon. No, no, no! I wanted to go to San Francisco! Oh boy. The captain announced a change of destination. The Water Lily. I should have freaking gone to Honolulu when I was in Manila then. The Water Lily would now make for nearby Hawaii rather than San Francisco. We would make port in Honolulu in 5 days, and we would find our own further conveyance from there. Monsieur Fogg's lips pressed ever so slightly together, a rare outward sign of entirely understandable annoyance. This, my master said, will not do. Indeed not, sir, I agreed, not even daring to calculate the delay and expense our unexpected diversion would cause. Monsieur Fogg gave me a cool, appraised glance. Captain Wickard has reneged on his word as a gentleman, he said curtly, before lowering his voice to an utmost furtive undertone. Our course is clear, we must mutiny. All right. I opened my mouth to agree wholeheartedly, but he continued on without so much as a pause. See to it, Passepartout. Use your natural charm? I interjected back brightly. Quite, he said, with the agreeableness of a gentleman who has just given his valet a near Herculean task. We will mutiny in 5 days. When we reach Honolulu, make your preparations as you see fit. Oh, no. This is very bad. My task was clear. I was to foment mutiny above the Water Lily. I decided to begin by exploiting the crew's animosity towards one another. Divide and conquer, or so dear Mamma always counseled. I considered inflaming their religious passions, though such passions were by their nature unpredictable. So I decided to desecrate the Shinto crime and blame it upon the zealous Christian converts of the crew. It was not long before the Shinto adherents began to see the mutter of their ill treatment, looking towards the captains with suspicious eyes. Such suspicion could easily be tipped into revolt. It was with satisfaction that I noticed a certain increase in tension aboard the Water Lily, a situation I would carefully have to exacerbate if my master's mutiny was to have a chance of success. Next, I attempted to integrate myself with Commander Davis and the submariners, who were rather storm-tossed and disgruntled. There are no storms underwater, the commander muttered, her hair tangled underneath her cap. We should have submerged, I agree. Captain, we could risk all of our lives. I think perhaps you do not trust your abilities as submariners. The commander's face darkened at my assertion. Perhaps you are right about that, she said. Perhaps so. I took my leave, giving my seed of doubt time to sprout in my absence. I had attempted to suborn the obvious targets by the Water Lily, but my wars were often won by the unexpected. With that in mind, I turned my attention upon the ship's artificer, a tall, rather imposing woman in a short jacket embroidered with the gold's copper lily. Artificers ruled notoriously neutral in the matter of conflict or civil disruption, but I threw myself upon her mercy, only to find that there was a precious little of that to be had. Artificers, it seemed, were not notoriously neutral, but also notoriously hard-hearted. Greetings, Reverend. Honolulu. Honolulu to San Pedro. I think you're out of luck. There, no. Now, anyway, would you believe I introduced my daughter to cars to occupy her mind? Indeed. Honolulu to Port Moresby. Honolulu to Batavia. What are we gonna do? I spent the day putting the last finishing touches to my planned mutiny. It was a matter as delicate and serious as the creation of a souffle by a master chef. I spread word of my signal among my allies and stayed up late ensuring every man and woman on my side was true. Honolulu to Acapulco. Acapulco to Panama City. Panama to Port Moresby. We reached Honolulu in the dark. The captain took a small skiff to the harbor with a few of his officers, wishing to inquire about repairs before putting the Water Lily into dry dock. Monsieur Fogg watched the boat for a moment. Now is the time, he said crisply. I trust everything is in order. I assured him it was, and he nodded, having expected no other response. Let us hope so. With that, my master retreated to his cabin and called the signal to arms. The Water Lily erupted into chaos. Everywhere was the clash of sabers and pistols, and now and then I heard the shriek of an officer's sonic weapon. But I was not alone. The half of the crew that followed the Shinto creed fell in behind me, and with a rallying cry, they fought their Christian crewmates with vicious determination, clearing the top deck within an hour. The Chinese laborers rewarded my friendship with steadfast loyalty, throwing themselves into mutiny with all the desperation of men and women who utterly loathed the sea travel and longed to revenge themselves upon their instrument of torment in any fashion. They lit fires and tore up the already ragged sails, causing welcome chaos. The submariners, led by Commander Davis, charged out of the hold with the ship like a horde of impossibly athletic, avenging angels. There was a long, terrible moment when I wondered at their allegiance. Then Commander Davis caught my eye and winked. "It's Izumi, to my friends," she shouted, and tearfully, driving back any stragglers loyal to the Captain Wicker. I saw Mademoiselle Loretta trip up one of the loyal officers out of the corner of my eye. She tipped her bonnet in my direction, a gesture of respect from one player of the game to another. The whirl of the battle took me away, but not before I saw her falsify a magnificent feint and block the gangway to the navigation room. By noon it was clear how the day would end. The mutineers raised a ragged cheer of victory. I myself had ended up with a debonair scratch upon the cheek, and somehow come in possession of a brace of pistols and 3 sabers. By the time the captain and the officers returned, we had complete control of the ship. They were quickly trussed up and... oh, to return them to their skiff or to throw them in the brig. If we return them to their skiff, they could possibly go back to Honolulu and get reinforcements. If we throw them in the brig, let's throw them in the brig. And throw it into the brig for safekeeping. Monsieur Fogg emerged, surveying the scene of recent battle with a calm eye. "Well done," he said, with a classic gentlemanly understatement. Still, I was well done, and more, if I do say so myself. I'm at your service, Monsieur Fogg. Oh boy. To my amazement, the successful mutineers held a vote and elected me the new captain of the Water Lily. Oh boy! I tried to refuse, to little avail. What did I, passepartout, know of captaining a vessel as such? Rest assured, mes amis, it was in great part a ceremonial tile which made no particular demands on my seamanship. Monsieur Fogg, though pleased by the success of our mutinous endeavors, seemed to regard my elevation in rank with some wariness. "I am," he admitted, as we prepared for bed, "somewhat put in mind of Bonaparte. Parbleu! Otherwise, the succession passed smoothly, and I acquired Wicker's top hat as a mark of office. But I found the book of Job most helpful, don't you? Job, probably. New York. New York to Dallas, possibly. How would I know? Thank you. New York to Atlanta. Atlanta, New Orleans. The first mate, a cheerful girl by the name of Wang, came to me with an intriguing notion. "As you know, the Water Lily is a ship-to-submarine prototype," she said. "If the submariners cooperated, we could convert the submersible and make port in San Francisco in 2 days rather than 5. I called in Izumi, who greeted me with a flourish and a bow. "My dear Captain," she declared, not bothering to hide her amusement, "do you have orders for me? Can you get us to San Francisco in 4 days? Izumi's eyes sparkled. "Captain, I have been waiting for that order all my life. I will make preparations and we will submerge tomorrow at dawn." "Day 60, Monsieur Fogg murmured that night in his sleep, "and still some distance yet to travel. I know we only have 20 days. Now I'm a mysterious French pirate. Izumi was a woman of her word. At dawn, the Water Lily began its preparations to submerge. I cannot record the technical particulars of the enterprise, but my own experiences were thus. The ship began to groan and scream as the iron hull shifted to cover the top deck. The sails furled and the masts collapsed. The screw propellers engines transformed themselves. Bells and alarms sounded as the bulkheads were closed and sealed. Within an hour, the Water Lily had transmuted from a surface-skimming steamer to a watertight submarine. Izumi tossed me a fearless grin as she called for us to descend. My ears popped as we plunged ever deeper into the water of the Pacific Ocean, and a curious-sounding silence descended upon the vessel. The Reverend's daughter, last seen in Yokohama. I had little to do but pace the preternaturally quiet corridors of the submarine. Izumi and her crew were in firm and able control. I resolved to enjoy myself. I was still captain of the Water Lily, even in her new configuration. The crew saluted every time I happened to saunter into their vicinity. On the whole, I would rather recommend submarining to the discerning traveler. We surfaced a few miles out from San Francisco, who apparently a submarine emerging without warning in a harbor could cause all sorts of misunderstandings and complications. Yes, Izumi recommended that we row into the port on a skiff. I formally renounced my captaincy to Izumi, as she was clearly the most capable sailor above the Water Lily. She blushed in pleasure and seemed unaccountably delighted. Good fortune, Passepartout, she called, as we rowed away. You always have a home aboard the Water Lily. I turned towards San Francisco, still shrouded in the pale pre-dawn light. We have gained 3 days, my master said, and I could not help but answering with a smile. At 5 p.m. Alright, this should leave us plenty of time. San Francisco seemed less a city and more a ravenous beast, bent on consumption of everything, even of itself. Within the ever-expanding city limits, enormous steam-powered drills and diggers flattened hills, straightened roads, and reformed neighborhoods, and dumped the resulting rubble in stone into Mission Bay. I headed toward Chinatown to eat. It was a warren of crowded wooden and brick houses, temples, businesses, herbalists, laundries, and market stalls selling fruits and flowers. I was interested in conversation, so I decided to approach a young man with a cute ponytail who was relaxing outside a small shop with arms outstretched. He seemed to me to be a laborer. Despite his slender frame, his arms were heavily muscled. His name was Jing Huo, and he was enjoying his single day off from working at the Transcontinental Railway to New York. Is the line done? I asked, and he shot me a weary look. Nearly, but no. Outlaws keep stealing lengths of track. It is open to the public as far as Burlington. Still, I should not complain. At least I have a job. What would he do once the railway was complete? Dab-handed. Alas, I had little time to ponder this, as I had to bid him a hasty goodbye and return to my master. Okay, but this doesn't leave until 5, so we have a little bit of time. Chicago, we're not gonna be in, well, we could, Gina. Purple Coat, Dallas, New Orleans, diving goggles, wear top hat. Yeah, why not? Let's depart. Let's go to Burlington. We were lucky to arrive in San Francisco just in time to catch a journey along the as yet unfinished Transcontinental Express, which would take us as far as Burlington in 5 days, with only a handful of stops along the way. 5 days. Ooh, that'll leave us 11 days to get from Burlington to London. Burlington. I want to go from Burlington to Cheyenne, perhaps? Really, but there isn't a market to be found in Cheyenne. Now, anyway, I suppose you don't have any idea who my father is. My apologies, monsieur. I do not. Oh, don't worry, you will. Burlington to Dallas. Burlington to Atlanta. Like New Orleans. That's something. The first day aboard was enjoyable enough. American trains could clearly not compete with their European counterparts, but it was amusing to see them try. The posters proclaimed Pullman's Palace sleeping cars. and while not palatial in the slightest, they were at least serviceable. We sipped cool beer as we rattled through the long stretch of desert in the shadow of tall mountains. I gazed out the window at the endless, lifeless expanse on the other side, wondering if humanity would ever occupy this great open space. It seemed unlikely. Our fellow passengers were a curious mix of gold and silver prospectors, homesteaders, farmers from all corners of the world, Mormons, missionaries, soldiers, and stiff-necked gentry of various sorts. I gave a young black woman with a deep red bonnet and an infectious laugh a wide smile. Her name was Diana. "I am meeting my husband in Cheyenne," she told me. "He did construction work in New York, but New York isn't safe anymore. We have enough money to move now." "Why isn't it safe?" I queried innocently, having only the broad strokes of American news and history. "You did not hear the draft riots in Europe?" she asked wonderingly. "New York has always had Confederate sympathies, and when the Union began drafting New Yorkers they rioted. They killed and burned black homes. My husband has never felt safe since. But now we're moving to Cheyenne," she smiled, glowing with happiness. "Where else can one go but New York?" I asked, thinking of our journey ahead. "New Orleans," she replied. "You can take the paddle boat down the Mississippi River from Burlington," she laughed, "though New Orleans is dangerous in its own way." We talked a little more, and this afternoon wore into the evening, and we passed by Ogden, close to Salt Lake City. We watched as passengers disembarked, glimpsing fertile fields and well-tended ranches out of the windows of the train. Ugh. "Greetings, Diana." "Well, good evening there, mister." "Burlington to New Orleans." New Orleans to Miami." "New Orleans to Havana." Today a fellow with a painfully trimmed mustache and an impeccable suit approached me outside the lavatory. I nodded to him companionably, and then his lips parted in a contained grin. "I am Felix Granger," he said. "You are a puzzle." I was utterly flummoxed. "I? A puzzle?" I repeated in consternation. "Monsieur, I am a simple man with a past whose past is an open book." "Oh, no, don't tell me you came to be on the Transcontinental. Thereby hangs a tale I can tell, good sir." It seemed a probing question, which made me immediately suspicious of his motives. I made some non-committal answer, but he pressed me further, and finally I excused myself with some fabricated errand. What a strange, ill-mannered fellow! We stopped at Cheyenne, Wyoming, for a few hours in the evening. The trim, mustached fellow disembarked to talk with a 6-foot-tall woman who wore the latest slim train skirts and pistol tucked under her waistband. We watched, none the wiser. At luncheon I asked one of the women homesteaders, who was informed me that she was Esther Hobart Morris, a justice of the peace, and indeed the first one in America. Good for her. She sniffed. "Honestly, some women! What's wrong with being a wife and a mother, I ask you?" The trim mustached fellow boarded the train again before the last whistle blew, his face drawn and anxious. Oh, we didn't even get the option to disembark in Cheyenne. I don't know. Oh, we're so close to the... Oh, I don't know if we're gonna make it. Ah, we were held up by outlaws. They dragged tree trunks over the line and forced the train to a halt. Before boarding, brandishing pistols and sabers, I looked at my master, who had a certain glint in his eye, and I did not doubt that he wished to resist these outlaws' demand, being a man with the deepest respect for the law. The lead bandit fired his gun into the air. "The name," he declared, "is Jesse James. Now you give me everything you got." The saber lifted to my throat. Oh. I handed over my wallet. What else could I do? At least I did not keep all our money in the same purse. Monsieur James smiled a toothy smile and tossed me 10 pounds back in return. The saber pointed, moved on, Now it was Monsieur Fogg's next. What about you? You look good for it. I dreaded what Monsieur Fogg's response would be. His gallantry would never acquiesce to such a man. Monsieur Fogg cleared his throat. I would trouble you to lower your sword, he said. I listened, fearful. You'd trouble me, would you? James replied. Somehow I doubt you would. Monsieur Fogg stiffened a little. His eyes narrowed. I could see he was about to do something terribly rash. I swung at the outlaw with a fist, not a heavy punch, but enough to send him reeling a touch, and then Mr. Fogg, with a swoop, battered him over the head with a trunk and threw the man out of our carriage. Through the window, I saw him being picked up by a group of rather surprised soldiers who waved a thank you. We still don't have our wallet, though. Then the steam engine restarted, and we were soon on our way. Not much worse for the wear, although our valuables were impounded as evidence. We did not have time to wait for the case to come to trial, but the officers compensated us a little, to the tune of over £1,000. A kind fellow passenger gave me a spare pair of shoes, and a few hours later we reached Burlington. We disembarked, grateful to have arrived in one piece. Oh, brother,